when you're sitting underground with a key around your neck to destroy the world, and you're like 27 years old, the primary thought you have is...
In today's episode, I sit down with an ex-CIA spy.
Every operation assigned to me, I was like, who the gets to do this? This is awesome. Oh shit, but if I get caught, I'm not gonna get caught.
We went super deep on all things influence, getting secrets from people, and influencing people to do pretty much anything you want them to do.
Perfect example is all the people out there who try to teach you lie detection. You have to skip to the part where you can quickly determine if they're lying because you're watching the micro expressions in their face. All people of all types are motivated at their core by these 4 motivations. And the acronym is RICE, RICE. The R stands for the word reward. The I stands for ideology. The C stands for coercion. The E stands for... If you understand which of those 4 motivations to lean on, you greatly increase your opportunity to influence them in a short period of time.
We talked about how the CIA literally hack people's brains and get information, secrets, and intel from anybody and then leave without even being noticed.
Well, it's not just about stealing secrets, it's about gaining access to them, right? Secret operations are called clandestine operations. When you talk about like secret ops, covert ops, a lot of that terminology is Hollywood stuff. What we call it in the professional world is clandestine operations. Truly clandestine operations are so secret that the operation is planned and executed and successful and evaded, and nobody even knows it happened.
I asked him about all the CIA conspiracies, including the JFK assassination, plus a few more, and his answers will really take you by surprise.
Conspiracies all start because something factual happened. 9/11 really happened. JFK assassination. JFK was assassinated. Like, these are real things that actually happened. That's the start of a conspiracy. And then immediately after the true event, there is a lack of information. And then here's a convenient explanation, a story.
And he taught us how to really think clearly in the moments of chaos, in the moments of stress, and how we can make proper decisions and really get the exact outcome that we actually want.
I've been fearful for my life in at least 2 operations, one of which is a counterterrorism operation, and we actually had a terrorist bomb go off. When a bomb goes off,
shit gets real.
Holy shit, stuff gets real.
This was probably one of my most favorite interviews I've ever done, so you guys are in for a treat, learning secrets from an ex-CIA spy on influence, persuasion, and espionage. So if you're brand new to this channel, welcome to the Dream Out Loud podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button because every single week we put out amazing interviews and episodes to help you learn the skill set and the mindset to create your dream life. So without further ado, help me and welcome the one and only Mr. Andrew Bustamante. Andrew, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
I'm excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have a conversation with you. I've been watching all your stuff online for a while, obsessively, and so we can give some context to everyone watching this. What can they expect over the next hour, however long we're going to talk? What's in it for them to really hang around and listen to everything you're going to talk about?
I really hope that people stick around because what we're going to talk about is how to apply spy frameworks, proven CIA intelligence frameworks, to breaking through barriers in personal life, professional life, and social life. That's what I specialize in. And then we wrap all of that into a container that also makes it super relevant with current events, current considerations, and the real social dynamics of what our world is challenging us with.
I love it. So how has being a CIA spy, how has that helped you coming out of the whole world of being a spy? How has that helped you in life and business?
I think the first place is that, espionage is an art of stealing secrets. Like, that's what espionage is. It's theft. It's theft of secrets. And what I found when I became trained to be a professional intelligence officer, I found that there are just as many secrets out there as you've always suspected are out there. But until you know how to actually get access to those secrets, they really are out of reach. So for me, I remember being in high school and college and a young professional in the government and then even in corporate America, knowing that things were being kept from me, but not ever knowing how to get access to those things. It's like there was a group of people who knew, and there was a group of people who didn't know. And you know that the other group knows, and the other group knows that you don't know how to get to the same secrets. And there's always this divide. And that's how you end up, finding these people who are late 50s, early 60s, who are bitter and jaded because they never even had the opportunity to succeed because they never got access to the secrets that somebody else got access to.
That annoys me. Like I said to you right before we got started, I'm like, I've always loved a good conspiracy. And especially being here in Vegas, there's Area 51 not far away. And
Yeah.
I always love these things. And what annoys me so much is I'm like, I don't think I'll ever know all the things of the untold secrets out there. Well, unless I learn a lot of secret stealing things from yourself.
Well, it's not just about stealing secrets, it's about gaining access to them, right? Because true clandestine operations, real like secret operations are called clandestine operations. When you talk about like secret ops, covert ops, a lot of that terminology is Hollywood stuff. What we call it in the professional world is clandestine operations. Truly clandestine operations are so secret that the operation is planned and executed and successful and evaded, and nobody even knows it happened.
Wild.
Right? So think about like theft usually means I steal from you, you report the theft. If I steal from you and you never even know you were stolen from, it's not theft, right? In that case, it's like, it's something I know I did. It's a clandestine operation.
How does somebody become a spy?
There's a lot of different ways. So, I mean, just for me, I had friends who joined CIA and spent their entire like adult life trying to get there. They went to the right schools, they studied the right things, they networked with the right people, and then they ended up getting recruited. I have other people who would have never in a million years thought to apply, who were invited or got recruited or got desperate and had no other option, and then ended up coming into the agency. Military people get recruited, government people get recruited, foreigners get recruited. For me, I was coming out of the military. I was trying to go into a different arm of government service, and then I got recruited, kind of intercepted as I was trying to go somewhere else.
What are they really looking for in someone?
When you're looking for someone who's going to be good at clandestine operations, you're looking for someone that has a high risk tolerance. You're looking for somebody who can think quickly on their feet. You're looking for somebody who has a natural way of learning social skills quickly. And you're looking for somebody who's resourceful, right? Somebody who can do more with very little. And then even better, if they can do more with little and think on their feet in a way that makes them socially enjoyable, now all of a sudden you have essentially the perfect recipe for somebody that you can send anywhere in the world to get something done with little supervision. And the harder it is, the more motivated they are to keep trying.
So I heard part of your story was one of the things you did, you were sitting underground, nuclear weapon keys. Talk to us about that. Like, I want to understand what's happening in your head in that situation. You've literally got the keys to end the world almost. Like, walk us through that.
Yeah, so I was an Air Force officer, and I was what's known as a nuclear missile officer. And there are, a few hundred nuclear missile officers in the United States. We sit in underground bunkers and we babysit nuclear weapons, and we have keys around our necks that we're just waiting to turn the key if the right order comes in. When you're sitting underground with a key around your neck to destroy the world, and you're like 27 years old, the primary thought you have is, my life sucks. Because all of your other 27-year-old friends are at the bar, meeting girls, going on dates, watching movies, right? Like they're at the gym, they're doing something, where you are stuck in an underground bunker for sometimes up to 72 hours at a time. And then you might only do that 2 or 3 times in a month, but that comes out to 7 or 8 days where you don't even see sunlight. And that sucks, dude. When you're even mildly ambitious with exercise or any kind of social life, being underground is miserable. Now, there were some people who were also missileers who were introverts who loved it because they were away from everybody. And they were just underground, and they had their book or they had their sketch pad or whatever else. And the only thing they had to do was periodically answer what's known as an emergency access message.
Interesting. So they're really looking for people. So you said high risk takers, people who can think quickly. And then from there, it's just a matter of all these skills can be trained if you're an outgoing person almost?
You don't even have to be an outgoing person. Here's what's fascinating to learn about CIA that I never realized before. The movies have it all wrong. The movies make it look like there are people who are born gifted, and those gifted people are just naturally good at language, or they're naturally good at combat, or they're naturally good at whatever, puzzles. And then there's like this secret person who goes out there recruiting these folks from their jobs. That's not how that shit works at all. The way it actually works is that if you are a neurotypical person, meaning you're not on some bell curve extreme of like idiot savant or mentally retarded, if you are neurotypical, then it's just a matter of training you in a set process that has a high probability of success, and you can be a spy. The skills are all learnable. The skills are all trainable. The question is just how quickly can you learn them? And the people who are a little bit more risk tolerant and the people who are a little bit more personally motivated learn faster. But the people who are a little bit more introverted or the people who are a little bit less motivated, they can still learn. They just learn slower. The reason that's so important, man, is because when you're carrying out covert operations around the world, you need a really diverse pool of people to pull from. Sometimes you need an old white guy. Sometimes you need a young black girl. Sometimes you need an Arab who speaks French. Sometimes you need a Latino that speaks Chinese. Like, you need all sorts of mixes. The only way that you're going to get those mixes is not by finding the one or two super talented people. It's by getting a lot of neurotypical people and putting them through a proven training process.
Do you speak other languages?
I've learned 3 languages.
You had to learn through the CIA, or you knew them prior?
One of them I knew prior that the CIA refined further. Yeah. And then I learned 2 others with CIA for operational reasons.
What are they?
And then you lose them over time.
You don't use, yeah.
You lose it. Yeah. I mean, they're there, but you lose them over time. So my languages were Japanese, Thai, and Chinese.
Oh, wow.
And then English is my native language, but then my cultural language is Spanish. I'm culturally Latino.
Ah, beautiful. Okay, walk me through a bit, because I've every single time I catch a plane, I rewatch Mission Impossible movies. I love this stuff, and I know everyone watching is like, how accurate is it? But walk us through. I know you can't talk in depth of like missions and things you've done, but just so we can have some context and put it straight. What does a spy actually do when they're out on I don't know if you even call it a mission or...
Yeah, we call it an operation.
Operation.
So there's multiple types of spies. And you see that kind of demonstrated in Mission Impossible movies or James Bond movies. There are human intelligence operatives. That's essentially what, whatever the hell the guy's, Tom Cruise's character, right? That's also James Bond. They are human intelligence officers, meaning their job is to go out and meet people and extract secrets from people. Sometimes that means they get a thumb drive. Sometimes that means they steal a secret. Sometimes that means they steal a girl, whatever it might be. But then you also have technical ops officers. And those are the Qs who create cool gadgets. And those are the whatever the
MI6.
Mission Impossible group was. MIG, is that what they call themselves?
I think it's
MI6. MI6 is the British intelligence service.
Oh, okay.
But there was some name that the Mission Impossible team, whatever they were called, but they also had a tech person. Then you have analysts who actually process the information. Those are also spies. Then you also have linguists who process foreign language. Those are also spies. And you have people who listen in on signals like telephone calls and digital encryption. Those are also spies. And you have cyber hackers. Those are also spies. So basically anybody who works in pursuit of espionage being defined as the stealing of secrets that you're not supposed to have access to. Anybody who does that job is technically considered a spy. And that's something that the media doesn't do very well, because they focus so much on the person who gets to go out and actually meet other people.
I was Googling the other day. I don't know why. I forget why. I was Googling which countries has the death penalty still. And China is one of them. And I'm like, what do you have to do in China for the death penalty? One of them is espionage. So I'm assuming, as far as I went, but I'm assuming if China still has death penalty for espionage, probably other countries might as well. How do you deal with that? If you're on an operation knowing that some countries, if you got caught, they essentially would kill you.
That's why they recruit people who are risk tolerant. There's a joke that we have at the agency that we aren't hired because we're so smart. We're hired because we're too dumb to quit. So being too dumb to quit means that when someone poses an operation to you and they're like, hey, we need you to go to XYZ country and we need you to do XYZ thing for XYZ days, you're like, that sounds awesome. That's the first thing that goes through your head, right? I was just talking to somebody the other day. It's like, how many people in their life get to say, who gets to do this? Like every operation assigned to me, I was like, who the fuck gets to do this? This is awesome. That was the first thought that went through my head. And then thought number 4 or 5 is like, oh shit, but if I get caught, I'm not going to get caught. Like, I'm good at this. I've got a good tech officer. I've got a good plan. Like, so I'll be fine.
So it's a confidence thing that's reassuring you?
It's more like it's a proficiency thing. And
just being good at your skill.
Right, because you have to understand how it works, right? So for example, think about a professional chef. I am not a professional chef. Professional chefs understand food and flavors and temperatures. They understand it at a scientific level. They just know. Yeah. They just know that if you put this oil at this heat with this meat, it's going to come out savory and sweet at the same time. They just know it. I don't know how they know it, but they do. There's people who understand why it is that certain cuts of meat are more tender when they're cooked at a certain level than other cuts of meat. They know it because they're so proficient at their craft. Our craft is called tradecraft. So when a spy masters their tradecraft, then it becomes kind of like science. So well, if I go to Congo carrying out this kind of operation in this kind of way, I have a high probability of not even being noticed. But if I use the same tradecraft in France, I have a lower probability of success and a higher probability of getting caught. So I need to change my tradecraft, just like a chef would change their ingredients.
Interesting. Based off because their intelligence is better, or like cultural differences? Or?
There's so many things. Airport security levels, national identification scrutiny, how well police are trained, how well intelligence services are trained, digital collection, biometrics at the airport, biometrics in your ID, the way that the country views their relationship with the United States. I mean, there's a list goes on and on and on. Daytime activity versus nighttime activity. For example, if you're going to execute an operation in a rural part of Germany, you probably don't want to carry it. You don't want to do it at night because nobody's out at night. But if you're going to carry out an operation in Frankfurt, Germany, you probably want to carry that out at night because there'd be plenty of people out and you'll have more flexibility of movement than if you were trying to execute in the middle of the day.
I'm loving this. So what I'm gathering is major part of what spies do is collecting information. So how do we, because this is so useful for managers, CEOs, salespeople, like anyone who's wanting to, I don't like to use the word persuade, but I think we're all in a game of trying to influence other people. Like I was telling you before, I was like, I've always just loved influence. I think it came from the early days of learning how to pick up women. I'm like, how do I say the right thing and be the right person? And then I've always just been the one who peer pressured my friends to go to one more place or whatever, right? So I know this is such a great conversation for so many people in many different contexts, however they want to use it. So what is the process of actually like getting information out of people?
It's a bigger process than you would imagine. But I think the place to start is you were saying that we all like to influence and we like to persuade. 2 steps before you ever start influencing or persuading, you have to gather information. You have to collect information. You have to gather intelligence. So often, social media and traditional media make us think that you have to skip to the action. And the action is influencing or persuading somebody. Perfect example is all the people out there who try to teach you lie detection. You have to skip to the part where you can quickly determine if they're lying because you're watching the micro expressions in their face. Really good friend of mine, Chase Hughes. Chase Hughes focuses a lot on micro expressions, hypnosis, and picking up these nuances in a person. He's 100% right. It can be done, but you have to control the environment around the person in order to be able to extract those types of micro expressions, those type of nuances. Chase knows how to do that because he's used to teaching people in a world of interrogation. When you're a human intelligence officer, you're not interrogating people. You're having a casual conversation on the street. The difference is when you have a conversation with somebody as a sales lead or in the corporate office, if they don't like what you have to say, they can walk away. In an interrogation experience, they don't ever get to walk away. Right? So you can ramp up the pressure and see how it changes them. But in a social setting, you can't do that. They can literally just leave. So in human intelligence, what we're always looking for is gathering information to create what we call a baseline. What is normal for that person? And then you can start messing with different type of stimuli to make them change from their baseline. So let's take the example of picking up women, right? Most guys fear going up to a girl and then using a line, a come on line. We all think that's what we have to do. Why do we think that? Because media, traditional media, social media have made us feel like you got to be the confident guy that goes right up and has a pickup line. Fuck no. Gather information first. You think there's a pretty girl, watch her for a few minutes. Is she there alone? Is she there with friends? How does she act? Does she look nervous? Does she look happy? Is she drinking vodka? Is she drinking orange juice? Like what's going on? Observe for a little while, right? You will see what makes a girl self-conscious if you just observe her for about 7 minutes.
And why are you looking for what she's self-conscious about?
Because if you know what she's self-conscious about, then you know not to approach her on that thing, right? If you see her like constantly fixing her pants, then you understand she's probably in uncomfortable pants. She's probably self-conscious about whatever it was that made her wear these tight pants. So don't compliment her legs, her butt, her ass. Don't do anything like that. Compliment her on the thing that's natural. She doesn't mess with her hair, right? She doesn't mess with her jewelry. She doesn't check her face for makeup. Compliment her on something like that. Or skip her altogether and talk about her friend, or talk about the drink, or talk about the bartender, right? It doesn't have to be a come on line to go up to somebody and just be like, I've been waiting a while for a drink. How did you get that so fast?
Yeah.
Right? But that starts a conversation.
It's a pattern interrupt too.
And what's so important is that in the world of intelligence, in the world of information gathering, it's a constant game of who has more information. So don't throw yourself into a conversation or a negotiation or a sales pitch unless you have superior information going in. Because if you try to go head to head, then it's a race of who collects the most information in the moment.
Is there a way to, like you said, so there's a lot of observation happening. Is there a way to sort of, or if we were to pinpoint or a certain thing for us to really go in and look for, like what I guess what I'm asking is what really drives people at a very unconscious level? If we were to look for certain habits, things, because I know significance for people is a big driver, and some people it's a lot higher in some and not as high as others. So me personally, like sometimes if I'm wanting to influence someone, I will look for how can I attach this thing to how it's going to make them more significant in the thing that they actually want. Or I'll look for what's their actually values. If someone values family, attaching how it's going to benefit their family is going to influence them a lot more than if I was to say it's going to allow you to travel the world. Like they might not care about it. So that's my understanding of it. What are you kind of looking for? Like, or is there stronger internal motivators that we need to sort of be looking for to attach the thing we want to influence them on back to?
You said the word several times during your description just now, right? It's really all about benefit to the target. What benefits them? And that sometimes that benefit is a value. Sometimes that benefit is very transient or temporary. Sometimes that benefit is just an escape, right? But if you observe with an eye towards what benefits the other person, that's really how you get closer to the place where you can influence or persuade them. So if you're talking to somebody who, like car salesman, somebody walks into a car dealership and they're asking about a car. Well, are they interested in a car? No. They're interested in a benefit to transportation, but you don't know what that benefit is. Are they looking for transportation that makes them look and sound cool? Are they looking for transportation that makes it comfortable for their kids? Are they looking for transportation that makes it safe for their spouse? Are they looking for transportation that's cost effective? You have no idea. But what you do know is that they came to a car dealership because they're looking for the benefit of transportation. You don't know whether they're there because they like that brand of car or because they don't have a car and that was the closest dealership they could walk to. Too often, people leap to an assumption and they oversimplify the benefit of the target or of the other person or of the mark, whatever you want to call it, right? You actually don't know their benefit unless you take the time to observe. Because again, you're looking for the baseline. You've got to gather information. One of the best ways to gather information is just what you're doing right now. You just sit there quietly. If you sit there quietly, people talk. And guess what every word is? Every word is information. It's data. And if you're paying attention with an eye towards finding the benefit that they're talking about, you will see a pattern in what they say.
I have noticed that. And sometimes, because naturally, like I'm super excited to talk to people. I have noticed, I'm like, the more I shut up, the other person will fill the void of being like, talk. And they just give up, because I coach a lot of people. So a lot of times when I coach, I'm just quiet. And they just talk so much stuff. I'm like, can I talk now? I just heard all the things you're telling me, that your problems, and you don't know about because the way you said that, right? I've heard you talk about the RICE method, I think it is. What's the RICE method?
So RICE is an acronym, that stands for core motivations that all human beings have. And when I say all human beings, I mean all human beings, all ages, all races, all ethnicities, all education levels, all religions, you name it. And the acronym is RICE, RICE. The R stands for the word reward. The I stands for ideology. The C stands for coercion. The E stands for ego. So all people of all types are motivated at their core by these 4 motivations: reward, ideology, coercion, and ego. If you understand what their strongest motivator is at any moment of time, whether it's their age, the part of the day, their emotional status, if you understand which of those 4 motivations to lean on, you greatly increase your opportunity to influence them in a short period of time.
So it's about discovering which one or using all 4.
It's about understanding which one is preeminent, always knowing that the other 3 also exist. So for example, in this moment that you and I are talking, you can be motivated by rewards, you can be motivated by ideology, you can be motivated by coercion, you can be motivated by ego. But they're not all equal to you right now in this moment, in this studio, on this day, in this mood. It takes a bit of observation to understand which one motivates you the most in this moment so that we can have the highest chance of success if we're trying to influence you.
And what are you looking for to determine? So my understanding is, so reward, obviously, we'll do anything we like pleasure. Ideology, our beliefs, our internal idea of the world, is that correct?
Yep.
Coercion. So if you don't do this, then I'll fuck you up.
Force, exactly.
Okay, so force, I'm assuming it'll work. There's a saying I know, it's like someone convinced against their will is still of the same opinion. So I'm assuming that's the one you probably don't want to go for.
Correct.
And then ego, so a significance thing, like how you get to play their ego?
Close. But ego is a great one because people misunderstand the term ego with egotistical.
Right.
We all have an ego. We all have a way we want the world to view us. That is our ego. Mother Teresa had an ego. Gandhi had an ego. Martin Luther King had an ego. Biden and Trump have an ego. The difference is some people become egotistical, which means they must be seen as powerful or smarter or whatever else. We've got to separate the 2 terms to really understand the motivational value. Because if you can meet somebody and validate or encourage or give them the benefit of expanding their ego, they will be more susceptible to persuasion and influence because they feel like you are validating what they value, which is being self-sacrificing or being a leader or being patient or being a good mom. Like, we all have egos. And if I ask you to do something that's in line with your ego and I validate your ego along the way, you're more likely to be persuaded to do what I want you to do.
Would another way to say it like their identity, they believe to be true about themselves?
Fair.
Like if somebody was to value impact, or love or some service or something like that, let's say if I was going to sit and try to influence this person to do a business deal with me, it'd be like, hey, by doing this, we get to create a massive impact in the world and, et cetera, et cetera. Am I on the right track?
Yep, you're feeding their ego. Because for them, if their ego is to make a big impact in the world, and if one of their primary struggles or frustrations is that they're not in an impactful position, then you're inviting them to join your cause and contribute their passion to your impact. And now all of a sudden they say yes.
Are one of these higher than the other?
The highest of all 4 is ideology. And that's why you see so much marketing, so much advertising, so much propaganda centered around ideology. If you think about religion's a fantastic one. When you talk to somebody who is religious, you can get them to do basically anything in the name of their religion. There are people who kill in the name of their religion,
Sure.
right? There are people who leave families and stop talking to their moms and dads and brothers and sisters in the name of religion. That's how strong ideology is. Here in the United States, if the national anthem plays, guess what people do?
Yes.
They stand up. Even if it doesn't make sense, right? If the national anthem started playing right now, I would feel compelled to push the microphone aside, stand up and put my hand over my heart. It makes no logical sense. That's how strong ideology is, right? And what's super powerful about ideology as a motivator is nobody second guesses it. Religious people don't second guess their religion. Nationalists don't second guess their nationalism. Dads don't second guess being dads. sons don't second guess loving their parents. Like this is our ideology. It's what we do. It's insane because and when you're outside of that ideology, that's when you can see it. So any husband who's watched their wife do something irrational and nonsensical because she feels obligated to her parents, or she owes her parents, or she owes her family, or because her religion like you sit there and you're like, why would you do that? Doesn't make any sense. And then of course the spouse responds defensively. Well, you don't understand. You don't get it, right? It's my mom, it's my dad, it's my church. We see it from the outside, but you don't see it from the inside.
So if I'm sitting across the table, me and you I just met you and I'm trying to sell you on something. Let's just use sales for an example. What specifically would you recommend I ask or look for? How do I determine your ideology?
So a lot of it has to do with listening and being silent, like you said. And then you have to use a technique we call elicitation. So elicitation is a process by which you collect targeted information by asking adjacent questions. So for example, if I want to know how old you are, if I say, Morgan, how old are you? That is a direct question. You may not like that direct question. It might make you feel uncomfortable. But if I ask you something like, what year did you graduate college? Now I can do some very simple math and come up with a relatively close estimate about how old you are, right? Now, are there always exceptions? Yes, there are always the people who went to college and graduated at 24. But for the rest of us, the vast majority of us graduate university at about 22, right? So we can ask those questions. That's adjacent to what we're trying to ask, but we get the core information, right? Another way that you can observe somebody's ideology is just by watching their physical position, their environment, right? If you come into my work office, you're going to see pictures of my kids. You're going to see pictures of my school. You're going to see some of my awards at the CIA. You're going to see the things I value without ever even talking to me, because I took the effort and the time to put those things in my office. I want to be reminded of those things every day. You know what you won't see? My 8th grade report card that said I got a D in math. I don't want to remember that thing, right? So there's so much that you can pick up from the environment and from elicitation, asking adjacent questions of a person. And as long as you're listening with an ear towards, I'm not here to have a conversation, I'm here to gather information, you'd be amazed how much richer and how much more aware you are of the details you gather.
What can you gather from me? We talked a bit before we started. We talked about a lot of things. What have you already gathered in terms of my ideology, things that could play to my ego?
So it's a great question. There's a number of things to keep in mind, right? So there's a difference between assessment and assumptions. So I'm not assuming that any of these things are true. I am assessing, meaning from the data that I have had collected so far, I will assess that these things are probably true. So one, you like shortcuts. I'm assessing that you don't like to do a bunch of hard work. You like shortcuts. And then if you have to do hard work, or if hard work is going to give you a massive benefit, then you will do it, but you're still thinking in the back of your head, how can I make this easier? How can I make this faster?
What gave that one away? I thought you were going to say something about, oh, you're a risk taker. You said you skydive. You're here. These, I would have thought these would have been things. That's so interesting. Where did that one come from?
My first question is it accurate or is it inaccurate?
That's pretty damn accurate because, because I definitely am. Like I will joke with my team. I'm like, don't expect me to do a lot. Like I am a lazy person. That's also why I'm where I am in my life, because Bill Gates said, he's like, I ask lazy people to do jobs because they'll find the easiest way there. So I do naturally, I'm like, and what you said was, two things you said was so true. I will look for shortcuts, but not in a way to jeopardize, not to do a bad job. But I'm going to go, what's the best, most efficient way to get this done? Where it's done is better than perfect. Mm-hmm. And if it's putting in the effort, it's going to be very rewarding and it's impactful, then I'm all there. That's fine.
So I picked that assessment up. So let me tell you why I didn't talk about being risk tolerant. Mm-hmm. You did mention skydiving, but you only really mentioned it once, and you didn't have multiple examples of where you take big risks. I know you're an entrepreneur, but I only had one data point to talk about your risk tolerance. Where I did get the sense that you had shortcuts was because I've been listening to you talk about your sales strategy, about your live event strategy, about your pricing strategy, about how you maximize the people who attend your events. In every one of those instances, what you're doing is you're finding a way to make it as simple and easy as possible with the largest probability of success on the back end. You're not trying to make things perfect. Like, you're not telling me about how much effort you put into designing the menu just right. You're not telling me about how proud you are of your branding and your color patterns on your, like, some people will tell you those things, right? What you're talking about instead is like, here's how I feel the room. Here's where my metrics are. Here's my conversion rates. Here's my price points. Here's what I know about the second step and the third step in the sales process. I mean, that is a very pragmatic, efficient process.
I love it. Okay. Straight up question. Do the CIA use mind control techniques on civilians?
I will say the answer is yes, but it's not what you think.
So the whole MKUltra deal.
So MKUltra is actually first of all, it wasn't mind control on civilians.
Okay.
MKUltra was a series of experiments to see whether or not psychedelics would give us an advantage in some sort of intelligence gathering operation. That was what MKUltra was all about.
Wasn't it, tell me if I'm wrong here, so I heard that they use it on spies actually to help create double personalities?
So they experimented with a lot of different things. And this is so interesting because one of the things that people don't understand is that when you are in a national security role, everything takes second place to pursuing national security. So your personal health takes a back seat to national security. Your family takes a back seat to national security. The values that you have of treating people as equals takes a back seat to national security. National security has to come first. We call it service before self, right? So when you think about something like MKUltra, why was it that we were experimenting with psychedelics at all? Because our opponents were also. The Russians were experimenting with psychedelics. The Soviets were seeing whether or not they could get an advantage, maximize their national security, and gain an advantage over the United States by tapping into unmeasured or unknown theoretical powers that exist in the mind for their spies, but also whether or not they could find the right recipe by testing on prisoners or testing on, political opposition or whatever else it might be. Because of Russia, because of the Soviet Union's lack of human rights, they had this giant pool of people they could test on. Here in the United States, we had law and order, and we had a semblance of human rights. So we couldn't just grab anybody and test them. We had to find a legal process by which we could get a prisoner to say yes or grant them an extension to their parole or whatever else, as well as find volunteers. So that's the difference between the two. Same thing happened in World War II. Why did we start developing a nuclear bomb? Because the Germans were developing a nuclear bomb, right? Why were American dollars being spent to find historic artifacts that might give some sort of advantage because you have the Holy Grail? Because the Nazis were trying to get an advantage doing that. It's something we call the security paradox.
Yeah.
Where if I put an alarm system on my house, guess what you're going to put on your house? If I get a guard dog, guess what you're going to feel the pressure to do, right? If I get a guard dog that weighs 60 pounds, you're probably going to get a guard dog that weighs 80 pounds, right? If I get a handgun, you're probably going to get a bigger caliber handgun. This is the United States. It's a security paradox.
Yeah. What's up, Dream Nation? Have you ever wondered how far ahead your life would have already been if you had got access to this type of content at a younger age? Look, this is why I need your help. I'm trying to build the #1 personal development platform out there to teach you guys the tips, tricks, and attitude of what it takes to live your dream life and to bring the type of education that we all wish we had in school. This show only grows by word of mouth and new subscribers, so it would mean the world to me if you could smash that subscribe button right now, leave us a 5-star written review, or drop a comment below and share this episode with a friend. I would be forever grateful. All right, now let's get back into this episode. Can we talk about some conspiracies? I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm curious to just bring the conversation because I know if I'm a conspiracy lover, other people are as well.
Absolutely.
So down the whole line of, so there's been, especially growing up in Australia, right? So I don't know what it's really like here. Like I said, I'd like to stay quite objective with things, but because Australians, we stay quite, we've never had threats really. I mean, I think Darwin got bombed, the top of Australia back in, I think, World War II. apart from that, like we just get left alone. We surf and we hang out and we go to the bar. And so when we look at and we hear about, all the conspiracies, like there's things like the JFK assassination, and then there's the thing of going, well, the CIA did it. Can we start with that? Like, and I don't know if you're allowed to talk about it or I don't know what, but I'd like to just sort of hear your perspective on that whole conversation, because if you talk to the conspiracy theorists, they're like, the CIA did it.
So 2 things that are important for this conversation. First is understanding that Australian culture, as it relates to the society's view of the government, is very different than the American culture of how society views the government. So for example, everybody knows that CIA is America's secret intelligence service. Very few people know that Australia even has
I had no idea.
a secret intelligence service, let alone a very effective secret intelligence service, right? So right there, you got 2 major cultural differences. So when your whole society already knows you have an effective secret intelligence service, they already don't trust you. That's like the first thing. You have secrets. You know how to keep your secrets. Therefore, you must be keeping secrets from me. That's the logical way of thinking. So every American forever has always been like, the government has secrets they're keeping from me because they're so good at it. In Australia, guess what? The government has secrets they're keeping from you because they're so good at it. The difference is you don't even fucking know that they're that good at keeping secrets, right? It's a big difference that helps you understand why conspiracies are rampant in the United States and not so rampant in Australia.
Do you think they have any type of ground to believe the things they believe?
Absolutely. And conspiracies are important to understand because they're predictable. There's what we call an anatomy to the conspiracy. Conspiracies all start because something factual happened, right? So think of 9/11 and the 9/11 conspiracies. 9/11 really happened. JFK assassination. JFK was assassinated. Like, these are real things that actually happened. That's the start of a conspiracy. And then immediately after the true event, there is a lack of information. So there has to be a real event and then a lack of information. The third step is something that we call speculation. Now, speculation and suspicion are cousins of each other. Suspicion is healthy, right? It's good to be suspicious. It's good to question. Like, there's such a thing as healthy suspicion. But speculation is a very different thing. Speculation is when you start to assume that you know what the answer is to the question that you don't know. Well, immediately on the back end of speculation, somebody creates a story that closes the open loop so that there's a convenient explanation for why this real event happened that you're not allowed to know, that you don't really trust, and then here's a convenient explanation, a story.
It probably help people be able to, because there's like a bit of cognitive dissonance that happens, right? Some crazy thing like 9/11, like the fuck, and then jumping to the first thing that happens that, I don't know, people are interesting.
Yeah, and people don't like cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
Cognitive dissonance is like having a thorn in your sock. You don't like it, so you want to fix it.
Yeah.
Right? The problem is that when it comes to conspiracies, you can't just take the thorn out. Like, you don't know what actually happened in certain details. We don't know who actually shot JFK. We don't know what made the different towers fall on 9/11. Like, there's some secrets that we're not allowed to know. Well, then we start leaping to these conclusions like, oh, it was an inside job, or oh, it was CIA, or oh, it was whatever, because these are secret organizations and just, they can't be trusted because they keep secrets. Well, guess what? You keep secrets too.
Yeah.
Right? We all live in this strange world where somehow we expect that we're allowed to keep our secrets, but it's unreasonable that other people keep their secrets too. So we should have all secrets shared with us, but we're allowed to keep our secrets to ourselves. Otherwise, we suspect the other person. It's totally irrational.
So there's a thing that I do when I'm in some conversations. Like, for example, if I got to fire somebody, situations like this, like hard conversations, if I know I'm bringing you into like it's just harder to talk with somebody, right? I struggle, and it's funny because I know a lot about self-regulating and all these sorts of things. But there's still one thing that I can't shake, and I'd love to know how you deal with it, is hard conversations specifically, or just things I'm uncomfortable with. My whole body will change. I talk down here, like I talk in my voice here, because I just can't speak it out. I can get more shaky, I can really feel like the nerves come over. And even sometimes, like when I've interviewed some really big guests, even just like you meet someone who's like, oh my God, you're huge. Just like being able to really contain that and just be a normal freaking person. How do we sort of do that? How can we better just stay nice and calm and regulated when we have to have maybe hard conversations or nervous conversations and things like this?
So there's a process called stress inoculation. Have you heard of stress inoculation?
No.
So stress inoculation is just like being inoculated against a virus. It means that you have to replicate the stress that you're going to feel for this event. You have to replicate that through a scenario so that your body can physiologically adapt to the stress that you're going to experience.
You do it before?
So you role play or you practice it before. So here's what we do at CIA. When we know that we're getting ready for a high stakes operation, or we know that we're getting ready to meet with some massively either important, wealthy, or dangerous person, we will role play multiple times. There's something called a safe house. There are safe houses for our special operators that exist, where a special ops team getting ready for an op, they will all go to a safe house. They'll shut the door and they'll lock themselves in for anywhere from 3 to 7 days. And all they do is practice in this there's a big sandbox in the middle of the house. They'll just practice over and over again what the operation is going to be, right? Delta team is going to go here and Bravo team is going to go here. And then at 0800, we're going to assault the 2 doors from this end. And then after they've practiced it once, they wipe the sand clean and they do it again. And they wipe the sand clean and they do it again. And they try every different angle until they find the right angle, and they just repeat it over and over again. They're inoculating themselves about the stress of movement while also building a pattern of behavior, muscle memory about how they're going to execute. We do the same thing before we have any kind of high-risk conversation with a terrorist or with a child trafficker or with a drug dealer, right? You find a peer and you say, hey, I need you to sit in the shoes of XYZ terrorist, and I'm going to ask you questions, and I need you to respond like the terrorist would respond, right? And now all of a sudden I'm not sitting here with Morgan, I'm sitting here with, you name the bad guy, and I make it feel real to me. And then you make it feel real to me as well. So when I say like, hey, where's the bomb hidden? And then you tell me there's no bomb. I'm like, I got to find a way to get through this. I got to practice this. I got to inoculate this. So if you want to fire somebody, don't fucking fire them the first time that you walk in and sit with them to fire them. Fire them 15 times before that by talking to, a senior manager, or talking to somebody else in your company, or talking to your spouse, or talking to your best friend, and be like, hey dude, help me here. I got to fire a guy. He's been here for 15 years. He's kind of old and persnickety. So I just need you to be that guy. And I'm going to have a conversation with you, and I'm going to fire you. And you're going to find out quickly what words roll out nicely, what words don't roll out so nicely. And then by the time you actually sit with the person, you've already fired him 15 times.
Yeah.
You have information superiority, just like I told you earlier on, right? It's all about having more information than the other person. You're more in tune with how your body's going to react, and your body is actually inoculated against the stress of firing him, because your body's point of view is you've already fired them 15 times.
Just building the familiarity in your nervous system, I guess.
Right. That you're inoculating against, technically what you're doing is inoculating against the cortisol spike that happens when you put yourself in an uncomfortable situation.
How do we stop these things being used on us? So like with the rice method, I know, you can coerce people with guilt, things like this, because, one of my highest values is love. And that's why I don't like firing people, because I'm like, this is fucking hard for me, because like I genuinely just care about you as a human. It's very hard. And there's definitely been times in my life where I haven't made the best decision because I felt bad about what I was doing or something, right? So how can we, I guess, like mask or our feelings almost? How do you defend yourself in case of, what if you're up against another spy and they're trying to do things to you? How do we control that?
So you're actually asking 2 different questions. Your first question is, how do we stop someone else from using them against us? You can't. If somebody is skilled or trained, or maybe just natural, they'll learn to use these techniques on you. You can't stop them from using them. But what you can do is be aware of when the technique is being used on you, which is very similar to your second question, right? What can I do to mask against my natural response or instinct? When you are aware of what techniques are being used on you, it's very similar to being aware of what your natural response is. We say that everything starts with awareness. So if you already know that something's going to be hard, I mean, it makes sense now why you're so like concerned about giving somebody bad news. If you come from a place of love and you're wired for love and you're wired for like making people happy and you're wired for finding like the peaceful resolution, that means every time conflict is guaranteed, it's amplified because you already don't want to do it. You already know you don't want to do it. And for the last 25 years, you haven't want to do it. And now you got to do it. So it gets amplified. When you're aware of what's happening, that's the first step. And then once you're aware of something, then you can start to take proactive action to prepare against it, like inoculating through stress or inoculating through practice or repetition or outsourcing. Maybe you don't have to be the one that fires them. Maybe you can have somebody else fire them, right? Or maybe you can have somebody else breaks the bad news so you don't have to. But it all comes from awareness. When you see somebody tapping into your guilt or tapping into your fear or tapping into your sense of self-consciousness, right? When you're aware of it, you're already better prepared than the person who's totally unaware of their response or how they're going to feel. And going back to that idea of who knows more, who has more information, awareness is a big piece of information. Oftentimes the person who's talking to you and trying to manipulate you or trying to make you feel guilty, they're not even aware that they're doing it. So that means you're more aware than they are. You have more information than they do. You already have the advantage.
How do you make sure that your cognitive biases aren't disturbing your judgment? Like, let's say you're assessing me before. How do you make sure that you're not looking for confirmation bias or recency bias and skewing your judgment, completely fucking something up?
This question it totally relates to your previous question, right? Cognitive bias is so dangerous because people are not aware that they have them.
Yeah.
And then confirmation bias is also equally dangerous because people don't realize, they're not aware that that's what they're doing, right? So first, being aware of the fact that you have biases at all is an important thing. Here's what's tricky about biases, right? Biases are very hard to see in the future, but they're very easy to see upon reflection.
Yes.
So you can reflect back and be like, oh, I've got a bias for XYZ, right? Like I have an inherent bias for funny brunettes. Like a funny brunette can get away with murder with me because it's my mom was a funny brunette. My wife is a funny brunette. Like I've always thought funny brunettes were safe. So like if someone's a scam, like the scam artist I'm the most afraid of is the funny brunette. Where, a funny blonde doesn't really, I'm not inherently biased in a way that I'm vulnerable to a funny blonde.
So becoming aware of what you're already naturally biased to.
Correct. Because then you can see it in the future when you have reflected upon it in the past.
And what about collecting evidence? So this is also a reason why I try not to hire people, because I'm trained to see people's potential. People come to my room and they're like, oh, I'm all fucked up. I have self-doubt. I'm like, I see through their shit to be like, find their potential. So I've hired the wrong people because I'm like, they're so amazing. And then my team be like, the fuck do you hire this person for? They're an idiot. I'm like, yeah, but they're just so beautiful. I'm like, I can't hire. I don't like to do at least the first interview. They go now through a series of my team and I'll do the final one. And I'll look for like a lot of different, like I'll look for personality traits and I psychoanalyze the shit out of them, see what their natural traits are like. And then if I like it, it's good. But like, is there a way to sort of avoid that? Like naturally, like if I'm talking to someone, I'm picking up, like, let's say what you were saying to me before, oh, he's somebody who likes shortcuts. How do you avoid to continually keep finding more evidence like that? Because it might not be true.
So you're doing it yourself, right? You can't, unfortunately, what we all have to understand is you can't overcome a cognitive bias.
Yeah.
It is a cognitive bias. A cognitive bias by definition is a process that your brain finds that it's a natural shortcut for effort, because your brain doesn't like to do effort. Like you said, I'm inherently lazy. We're all inherently lazy. And our brain is the laziest part of our body because our brain constantly wants to conserve processing power, energy. Like it's just what the brain does. It's a survival instinct. So once I have a cognitive bias for funny blondes, or once a Christian has a cognitive bias for the ideology of Christianity, it doesn't ever go away My mom is a fantastic example of this. My mom was raised in a Catholic church. Then she rejected the Catholic Church when she was like 18. Now she's like 60 something, and guess what she still does? She acts like a Catholic, even though she rejects the Catholic Church. Like she'll talk smack about Catholics all day long, but then still practice Catholic cultural habits, right? Like Easter church on Easter service on Easter, right? Silly stuff. We've all seen it happen before. So you can't fix a cognitive bias. All you can do is become aware of it and then put practices in place that reduce the likelihood of you falling into your bias, which is why you have your whole team do pre-interviews before you ever interview it. I would actually recommend you go a step further and actually automate an assessment, like automate a challenge so that anybody, before they even get the first personal interview, has to go through an empirical challenge that then gives an empirical score to their success of the challenge before anybody even talks to them.
Yeah.
Because then you take away human bias altogether.
Yeah. It's a fascinating thing because most people just don't actually think clear. Especially when I sit with my marketing team all the time. Like I'm always saying, I'm like, you don't know that. You just think that you're making up shit because it's, it's what feels good for you, especially in marketing. It's like, bring me the numbers.
Yes.
And then I'm unemotionally going to look at the numbers and say, that's fucked, change that. Because that's what the numbers tell us. But I love what you're doing because it's really just a lot of self-awareness in the moment, right?
And it's hard to get there. I promise you that when you first started learning marketing, it wasn't that easy. You wanted to go by your gut too. It feels right.
Yeah.
It looks right. Of course, it makes sense. And why does it make sense to you? It makes sense to you because you would like it.
Yeah.
Not because the market likes it.
I know you're not allowed to talk about many operations that you've actually done. You're in the process of getting a lot cleared from the CIA so it can come out in your book. That's going to come out next year, right? Is there anything you can talk about? Like what I'm curious to know, like you've probably had so many awesome, gnarly stories. Is there anything you can talk about that you would say like, this was the most crazy thing that ever happened to me on an operation?
It's an interesting question. So here's what I definitely can say, right? I love the fact that before any operation, you have to learn the skills that you need for the operation. So you find yourself learning things that you never would have thought in a million years you had to learn. Like I had to learn how to free dive. Who gets to learn how to free dive, right? And I had to learn how to swim with a scuba tank at night with no lights. Who gets to learn how to do that stuff, right? Like it's one thing to learn how to scuba dive. It's something different to learn how to scuba dive at night with lights. But then to learn how to scuba dive at night with no lights, there's these cool things that you have to learn for any operation that you're going on. Some people have to learn how to, drive a car where the steering wheel's on the opposite side. Some people have to learn how to make a certain kind of cheese. Some people have to learn how to taste wine. Like you have all these things you have to learn. Some people have to go to school for a whole new language just for the operation. So we often joke at the agency that the people who have the most fun at CIA, the people who have the most fun in intelligence are people who are collectors of experiences. Because just like I told you, I learned multiple languages. I don't remember them. So it's not the mastery of the language that makes me feel satisfied. It was the opportunity to learn it at all.
Has there ever been a time you've been on an operation where you've actually been fearful for your life?
Absolutely. I've been fearful for my life in at least 2 operations, one of which is the primary subject of the book, my memoir that I'm getting cleared through CIA.
We can't talk about that.
We can't talk about it yet, but once it's cleared, I'll be able to talk about it with the world. But then there was another operation I was on that was a counterterrorism operation, and we actually had like a terrorist bomb go off.
Can you say which country?
No.
Okay.
But what I will say is like when a bomb goes off,
shit gets real.
Holy shit, stuff gets real. Like stupid example, right? For anybody who has followed me or who knows me, they understand that I almost always wear laced shoes. It's one of my, people ask me like, hey, Andy, what's your everyday carry? In the United States, we love everyday carry. And we always want to know like, oh, what model of gun and where do you conceal it? I'm like, my fucking everyday carry is laced shoes because I was trained.
Taking the lace off and kill somebody with it?
Close. I was trained to always have laced shoes on, always. But I was a fucking 28-year-old kid. And of course I knew better than what all the training was. Well, then I'm in a country and I'm in flip-flops and a bomb goes off. You know what happens when the bomb goes off? Cement flakes go everywhere. Glass flakes go everywhere. Your body parts go everywhere.
And this was obviously, you guys were aware that this might have been happening, or you were obviously there to some degree.
We suspected that there was a potential terrorist plot.
Shit.
That's completely different than suspecting that the attack was about to go on. Right?
And you were close enough to it to.
And I was close enough to it to hear the bomb, feel the shake, and then everything exploded, right? And you've got glass shards, body parts, cement shards, asphalt shards, people panicking, everyone's running, your flip-flops or your thongs or whatever you want to call them, that shit does not protect your feet, right? And I was just evacuating. I wasn't like a hero or anything like that. I was just getting away from the blast zone, and it tore the hell out of my feet. And I learned without a doubt on that day, this is why they told us to wear laced shoes, because you never know when this shit's going to. And my feet weren't the only feet that got tore up. Some people lost their feet, right? Some people got trampled to death because they stopped to try to care for their feet, and then the crowd rolled them over. Yeah. Like, that's the reality of it. The world is a dark place, and it's sometimes your survival really boils down to something as stupid and simple as that.
Has there ever been a time where you've been concerned or worried about getting out of a country, or nearly being caught or something?
So it's funny because that is actually the second harrowing experience, and that is the subject of my memoir. That's the one we
can't talk about. That's the cliffhanger. That's why we'll go get your book when it comes out.
I'll have to come back and tell you about it when it goes live.
Oh, I love it, man. I'm very fascinated because you've obviously been to God knows how many countries. You've seen things. You've become aware of things. You probably know secrets then most people in the world will never get to know. And I'm curious to know your perspective of just genuinely where you think the world's at right now and where it's going the next decade. It seems like there's a war is about to break out. Is someone going to shoot a nuclear bomb? There's crypto this. There's so many strange things happening in the world right now. And I'm just fascinated to know your perspective of what you think is happening right now and where you think the world's going the next 10 years.
So I'm going to start with the good news because it's important that people understand this, right? The world is always changing. It was changing when we were kids. It was changing before our parents even thought about getting married. It's going to change for our grandkids and our great-grandkids. So the world's always changing. It's always dynamic. The idea that we're going to reach some sort of like stagnation and always be the same and the change is going to stop is unrealistic because human beings evolve, technology evolves, society evolves, culture evolves, everything changes. So the good news is you don't have to be afraid of change. It's natural. We're not any more or less dangerous than we were 15 years ago. The danger is just different. It's just the way it is. Now, the bad news is, to answer your question, where's the world going in the next 10 years? We are entering into a phase where one of the big questions that's being challenged is whether democracy is really the best way to govern. That wasn't a question 15 years ago. That wasn't a question 30 years ago. 40 years ago, it was almost a certainty that democracy is the best form of governance in the world. Now, what we're actually seeing is autocrats and strong-arm governments and power plays get things done more efficiently, make allies faster, and grow economies faster, right? Look at Russia. Russia broke every international rule to invade Ukraine, and their economy is stronger than it's ever been. China has elected the same president like 3 times over now, and the dude's like got no plans of not being the ruler of the prime minister, the chair of the CCP anytime soon, right? Like, and it just goes on. Netanyahu is the prime minister of Israel.
Okay.
And here's a guy who has just as nasty of a track record politically as Donald Trump, right? Corruption and abuse and whatever else. And he's unpopular among his own people. And he's the prime minister of a true democracy. Israel is a true democracy.
Can you explain democracy? I'm so ignorant to this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
What does it mean?
Well, Australia's democracy too.
What does it mean?
So democracy means that the process of electing your leaders is pushed to the people in some way, shape, or form. Could be representative. It could be a true democracy. There's a different way of the people themselves choosing who leads them, right? And the idea that the population gets to have a contribution to where their country goes.
And you're saying it's more so leaning towards like a dictatorship.
Well, what we're having now is we're looking at a world where democracy had previously been assumed to be the most efficient, effective, economically powerful way of building a country. And now what we're seeing is that the rising economies of the world are actually not democracies. So it's challenging the assumption, the bias that we've had for the last 50 years about democracy. That's tough. That's tough because, remember, we were talking about the security dilemma, right? I buy a guard dog that's 60 pounds. You buy a guard dog that's 80 pounds. Well, what happens when the biggest threat in the world to America is a autocracy and we're a democracy? Now, all of a sudden, there's this pressure on the United States to become an autocracy. And here's what's really fucked up. I don't know how much you follow politics. In the United States, we are a two-party system, right? There's the Republican Party, and then there's the Democrat Party. There's the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party. That's what we are.
Yep.
What both parties have, like, our country is based on a two-party system, meaning both parties have to be present, and that there's value in having two parties that disagree and compromise and collaborate and work together. That's what our country is based on. But now, on both sides of the fence, you know what each party actually wants? To be the only party in power. Well, as soon as you have a one-party system, you have the foundation for an autocracy. You have the Chinese Communist Party, a one-party system that can elect one leader essentially over and over again forever. So even in the United States, we're already debating which party is going to be in control. France just dissolved their parliament for a very similar reason. Like the French parliament, that's a democracy.
Yeah.
The president dissolved the parliament.
Meaning
He made an order that said everybody who's in the parliament is no longer in the parliament, and the entire population of France has to re-vote their parliament back into power.
Why did he do that?
It's 2024, dude. That's fucking crazy. The whole country just hit reset on every governing official. That's nuts.
Why do you think so?
He did it because he saw a change in election behavior that he believed was being influenced by extreme political meddling. Mm-hmm. And he didn't believe that the French people wanted that level of meddling. He believed that the French people, if they had a chance to set the whole thing straight, to redo the whole thing, that they would actually vote their conscience instead of voting based off of what influenced them in the moment, right? Because it's awkward in Europe. In Europe, you vote for the leaders of your country, but then the EU also has a vote for the leaders of the EU, and sometimes the EU leaders aren't the same as the country leaders. So it's just an example of what I'm saying is the problem for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Like, it was a strong arm move for the French president to dissolve parliament. That was not something that the people asked for. It was not something that the people wanted. It was something the president decided to do on his own. That's strong arm leadership. That's an autocratic move. But he's doing it because he believes it's in the best interest of democracy.
Yeah. Do you think, two-part question, one, do you think Trump will get back in? And two, if he does, what do you think? Do you think he's more leaning towards that?
There's two high probability opportunities in the United States. Biden will be reelected or Trump will be elected. Those are high probability opportunities. So I advise all of my clients, all of my ultra high net worth clients, all of my corporate clients, all of my political clients, right? You need to be prepared for the two most likely outcomes, Trump or Biden. You must be prepared.
Both outcomes were a bit interesting, eh?
Both outcomes are bad news. Both outcomes essentially guarantee 4 more years of pain. Honestly, both outcomes guarantee 4 more years of pain, and then 4 years after that are completely unpredictable. Because in both cases, they can't really run again, right? So what the fuck comes after the next 4 years? We're all so focused on November, we're not even thinking about what happens 4 years after November.
You mentioned Israel and Palestine. That's one thing I did want to, because that's one thing I'm also curious on, because I'm so not aware of this. I guess also another conspiracy that comes into it, people, all these things. What do you think, like, what the fuck's happening with those two countries?
Well, Palestine is not a country, and that's part of the problem, right? Israel's a country. Palestine is a people without a country. They have been given land inside Israel, but they have not been recognized as an independent country. They have actually been recognized by multiple countries in the UN as being a sovereign nation, a sovereign state, but they are technically without land. They're technically a country without borders, right? And that's a big part of the challenge. It's a big part of the problem. So I don't think there's any conspiracy there. I think that it's actually very simple, and people just don't want to accept the simplicity of it. Palestine is a oppressed group. Israel is a wealthy country run by a government that's a democracy. It just so happens that the government and the democracy of Israel is also a theocracy that is Jewish. And it just so happens that Palestine is a group of people that is majoritively Muslim. It's still like it's a group that's oppressed, and it's a nationalized democracy, right? It's just that there's no separation of church and state in Israel. Yeah. Then you've got the actual villain in the whole thing. Israel's not the villain. Palestine is not the villain. Those are just the two peoples who have been pitted against each other by the true villain, who's Iran. Because Iran has funded an extremist group inside of Palestine to attack sovereign Israeli soil, which then set Israel into a course of action to try to fight that fundamentalist group, which is comprised of Palestinians. Not all Palestinians, just some Palestinians. So essentially Israel, who's totally safe and outside of the whole, Iran, who's totally safe and outside of the whole thing, has instigated this fire that has got the whole world on fire, right? And no one is remembering, nobody's focusing on the fact that it's all been instigated. The arsonist is Iran. And what we're focusing on instead is the actual fire that's still burning between Israel and Palestine.
Do you think a nuclear war is possible?
A nuclear war is always possible. As long as nuclear weapons exist, nuclear war is possible.
Do you think it will happen?
But that doesn't mean it's probable. Exactly right. Nuclear war becomes less and less probable every day because we understand the damage and the mutually assured destruction that comes from nuclear war. Now, when I say nuclear war, what I mean is what's known as interstate nuclear war, meaning a sovereign nation throws nuclear weapons at another sovereign nation. The big problem with our world right now is that there's nuclear capabilities that can be given to non-state actors. So what happens if a fundamentalist or terrorist group steals a nuclear warhead and sets off a nuclear warhead inside of a sovereign country? Now, who's accountable for the explosion, right? Like my big fear in Ukraine is that some Belarusian group will get their hands on a Soviet warhead and then explode that warhead in Kiev. That's my big concern, because if a suitcase nuke goes off in Kiev that can be traced to coming from Belarus, what do we do?
Yeah.
Does the United States then bomb Belarus with nuclear weapons? Does the United States send a nuclear weapon into Russia? Does Russia attack Belarus with nuclear weapons? What does NATO do? It gets to be a huge mess. Nobody's talking about the tactical relevance and probability of a non-state or ill-defined actor actually using a nuclear weapon.
It's wild. Andrew, this has been so cool. Where can everybody check out everything you do? You've got online courses. You take people for a day, teach them how to be a spy, and they run around the city. You do such cool stuff. So where can everybody find everything that you guys do and find you on social media?
Absolutely. The best place to find me is on my homepage, everydayspy.com. If you want to find me on social media, I'm at everydayspy. And if you're into the podcast world on YouTube, Spotify, or iTunes, you'll find my podcast, the Everyday Spy Podcast, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
I love it. Mate, I've got one final question I ask everybody before we wrap it up. So if you were to go back to your 18-year-old self and give him 30 seconds of advice, what would it be?
Women are not the answer you're looking for. You're looking for a challenge. You're looking for an opportunity. You're looking for growth. And right now you just think that all of those things happen in a female. There's so many better places to be looking for growth and opportunity and challenge that will yield far better results and yield a far better female partner for the rest of your life.